So, Apple podcast title, the 1960-61 NHL season, broken records, brawls, and the Chicago Blackhawks historic Stanley Cup. Apple podcast description. Dive into the unforgettable 1960-61 NHL season. We explore the structural end of the Montreal Canadiens dynasty, Gordie Howe's unprecedented 1,000th point, and the wild race for the 50-goal milestone between Bernie Geoffrion and Frank Mahovlich. From record-setting penalty minutes and front office fines to Bobby Bond's terrifying on-ice injury, we unpack the grit and glory of a defining original six-year in hockey history. Culminating in the Chicago Blackhawks' first Stanley Cup victory since 1938, this deep dive is packed with surprising facts and thrilling sports history. Perfect for hockey history buffs and curious learners alike.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're asking you to step into a time machine with us.
We really are. It's a fascinating trip.
Yeah, we're traveling back to a pivotal, genuinely earth-shattering year in sports history, the 1961 National Hockey League season.
Right.
And the mission of our Deep Dive today is to take a single, highly detailed Wikipedia article about this historic season and extract the most jaw-dropping milestones, the intense rivalries, and just the sheer grit of the original Six era.
Because it's really the era that defined modern hockey.
Exactly. We're going to look at how legendary dynasties end, how new legends are born, and how a massive 23-year curse was finally broken.
What's fascinating here is that this season marks a distinct, undeniable changing of the guard.
Yeah, set the scene for us a bit. What did the league actually look like in 1960?
So you have a league of just 6 teams, the original 6, but they are playing a grueling 70-game schedule.
Which is a lot of hockey against the exact same guys.
It is. The league had expanded the season up to 70 games from 50 in previous eras, and the physical wear and tear of those extra 20 games was profoundly changing how the sport was played.
Right.
But you can actually see this changing of the guard physically represented by the league's hardware this year.
Oh, the Hart Trophy.
Exactly. The original Hart Trophy had to be retired this season. Every single inch of it was completely filled with plaques.
Wow.
Yeah, and the general condition of the trophy had deteriorated from decades of handling.
Yeah.
So the league commissioned a brand new piece of silver, the Hart Memorial Trophy, to take its place.
It's incredibly poetic, literally retiring a battered symbol of the past to make room for a new era.
It really is.
Okay, let's unpack this because we have to start with the monumental off-season news that casts just a huge shadow over the start of this campaign.
The big retirement.
Right. On September 15th, 1960, Maurice Rocket Richard announced his retirement.
A total shockwave.
As hockey fans, we all know the myth of the Rocket. But looking at the actual ripple effect of his retirement in 1960, just how big was the vacuum he left behind in Montreal?
It was staggering. You're talking about a player who retired leading all scorers with a record 544 regular season goals.
Unbelievable.
Plus an additional 82 in the playoffs. And up to that point in history, he remained the only player to ever score 50 goals in a single season.
And he did that in 50 games.
He did in 50 games back when the schedule was shorter. No one had touched that mark since. So his departure removed the psychological anchor of the Montreal locker room.
But they didn't fall apart immediately.
No. If you look at the regular season standings from the source, the Canadiens didn't collapse right away. Toe Blake was still coaching. And with stars like Jean Beliveau and Jacques Plante, Montreal finished first overall with 92 points.
Right, they were an offensive machine.
They scored 254 goals and allowed just 188.
So a plus 66 goal differential. On paper, they still looked completely invincible.
They were steamrolling teams.
On October 13, Montreal completely routed the New York Rangers 8-4. Bernie Geoffrion and Dickie Moore each scored hat tricks in the same game.
Just dominant.
But despite all that regular season dominance, their playoff run ended in a stunning upset. They were defeated in the semifinals by the Chicago Blackhawks,
Which nobody saw coming.
And that single series loss snapped Montreal's run of 10 consecutive Stanley Cup Finals appearances. And it ended their streak of 5 consecutive Stanley Cup victories.
And this is where we have to look deeper than just the standings. Because in the original 6 playoff format, the first-place team played the third-place team in the semifinals.
Right.
So first-place Montreal draws third-place Chicago. Why did the dynasty crumble right there?
Systemic vulnerabilities.
Exactly. Think about the giants in your own industry. The ones who seem untouchable year after year. Nothing lasts forever. And the 1960-61 Canadiens are a masterclass in how even the most dominant forces eventually face a changing tide.
The grind caught up to them.
The 70-game season took a heavy toll on an aging Montreal core, And without the Rockets' unmatched intensity to carry them through those exhausting playoff grinds, they were highly susceptible to a younger, hungrier opponent.
And Chicago played a punishing, physical game.
They completely wore down Montreal's finesse. The Blackhawks took them down in 6 games, capped by a grueling triple overtime win in Game 3 where Murray Belfour scored the winner. Montreal's reign was definitively over.
While the Canadiens as a team were showing their mortality, individual players across the league were pushing human limits. Which brings us to Detroit Red Wings forward Gordie Howe.
Mr. Hockey himself.
During the season, Gordie Howe became the first player in NHL history to hit 1,000 regular season points.
And the magnitude of that achievement requires some serious context. Just to give you a sense of how far ahead of his peers Gordie Howe was.
It took years for anyone else to get there.
It took 7 more seasons before Montreal's Jean Béliveau would become the second player to match that 1,000-point feat.
Wow. 7 years.
Howe was operating in a completely different stratosphere. Even in this season, at an advanced stage of his career, he put up 72 points in 64 games.
But as incredible as the 1,000-point milestone was, the true dramatic narrative of the regular season was the race to match Rocket Richards' 50-goal record.
The chase for 50.
It turned into an intense battle between Toronto Maple Leafs rising star Frank Mahovlich and Montreal's veteran Bernie Boom Boom Geoffrion.
It was a fascinating study in endurance. Mahovlich was having a phenomenal year, leading the charge for a Toronto team that finished second in the standings.
But the 70-game season is a beast.
Right. As the season ground down to its final weeks, the pressure of that schedule really became apparent. Mahovlich hit a wall. He finished the season with 38 goals.
Agonizingly close.
Missing the record by just 2.
And then you have Geoffrion. Everything culminated on the night of March 16th. Toronto was playing Montreal at the Forum.
A huge rivalry game.
Toronto's star goalie, Johnny Bower, was resting a strained leg muscle, so the Leafs had to put Cesar Maniago in the net.
Which changed the dynamic entirely.
And that night, Geoffrion scored his 50th goal. The Montreal crowd just erupted. He got a wild ovation for matching the Rockets' supposedly unbreakable record right on home ice.
And we should note, hitting 50 goals was still viewed as a mythical barrier back then. Geoffrion breaking through that barrier against a bitter rival like Toronto was a defining moment of the era.
Proving that life in Montreal could actually go on without the Rocket.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Geoffrion didn't just score 50 goals, he added 45 assists. That gave him 95 points for the season, earning him the Art Ross Trophy.
Top scorer in the league.
And, fittingly, he was awarded that brand new piece of hardware we talked about earlier, the Hart Memorial Trophy for MVP.
But Geoffrion hitting 50 goals in a 70-game season is incredible on its own. It becomes even more profound when you look at the sheer physical brutality he and every other player had to survive just to stay on the ice.
It was a completely different game.
The source material outlines some moments of visceral violence that really challenge our modern understanding of the sport.
That is such a crucial point. Let's dig into the physical toll of this era, because I want you to listen to this stat from October 19.
Oh, the Rangers game?
Yeah. The New York Rangers goalie, Jack McCartan, shut out the Chicago Blackhawks 2-0. But the story of the game wasn't the shutout. Chicago's Reg Fleming set a record that night with 37 penalty minutes in a single game.
37 minutes.
It's absurd.
That is more than half of a regulation game spent in the penalty box by one individual. He took 3 major penalties for full-on battles with Dean Prentice, Eddie Shack, and John Hanna.
Plus a misconduct.
And finally, a game misconduct. It speaks to a culture where enforcing physical dominance was often prioritized over the actual score.
And that physical culture wasn't limited to a few enforcers. It infected entire games. Take the December 1st matchup between Montreal and Toronto.
An absolute bloodbath.
Montreal won the game 6-3 at the Forum. But the chaos on the ice is what dominated the headlines. Referee Frank Udvari called 21 penalties in that game.
21.
Including a slew of major penalties in the third period. You had heavyweight bouts breaking out everywhere. Omri Richard fought Frank Mahovlich.
Star players throwing punches.
Dickie Moore squared off against Bob Pulford. Marcel Bonin scrapped with Bobby Bown. It was a complete meltdown.
The aftermath in the press really captures the animosity of the original 6. Toronto's general manager and coach, George Punch Imlach, was furious with the officiating.
Right.
He told the reporters that referee Udvari and the 2 linesmen, Loring Doolittle and George Hayes, should have been named the game's 3 stars because of
Okay.
all the help they gave to Montreal.
Which is an incredibly sharp piece of sarcasm.
Very sharp.
But NHL President Clarence Campbell did not find it amusing at all. He promptly fined Imlach $200 for those comments.
$200.
Today, that wouldn't even cover a post-game team meal. But back then, it was a strict message from the league office to stop publicly criticizing the referees.
But the violence of this era wasn't just about fighting and fines. It was about players surviving catastrophic, life-threatening situations.
Which brings us to the terrifying Bobby Bowne incident in the very last regular season game.
This is one of those stories that forces you to totally reevaluate the mindset of these athletes.
Toronto was playing the Rangers. Toronto's Bobby Bowne, known for his relentless, hard-hitting style, became a victim of a freak collision. Camille Henry of the Rangers ran into Bowne, and Henry's skate blade came up and cut Bowne in the neck.
A skate to the net.
Unbelievably, Bowne gets patched up and returns to play the third period. He finishes the game.
Adrenaline is a crazy thing.
But after the game, while he's boarding the team bus, he begins to gasp desperately for air. He's groping his neck, waving his arms in panic. His teammates realize he's in critical trouble and rush him to the hospital, where doctors had to perform an emergency operation just to permit him to breathe.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really highlights the brutal labor realities of the original Six era. It's easy to look back and call these guys gladiators, but that oversimplifies the situation.
There was no safety net.
None. There was no players' union holding the league accountable for medical protocols. Roster spots were incredibly scarce. There were only 6 teams in the league. The underlying fear was that if you didn't play through an injury, someone else in the minors would gladly take your job.
So you have a player suffering a catastrophic neck laceration.
And the systemic pressure of the era compels him to put his gear back on and skate out for the third period. It's a miracle he survived that bus ride.
It is genuinely chilling to think about. Now, shifting gears from the regular season grind, let's look at how the postseason unfolded. Because the playoffs of this 1960-61 season were historic in their own right.
Highly unpredictable.
We already mentioned that the third-place Chicago Blackhawks shocked the first-place Montreal Canadiens in the semifinals. Over in the other bracket, the second-place Toronto Maple Leafs fell to the fourth-place Detroit Red Wings.
Another upset.
Detroit took that series 4-1, despite Toronto having an incredible roster, and Dave Keon winning the Calder Memorial Trophy as the league's best rookie. Detroit just overpowered them, backed by Terry Sawchuk in net and Gordie Howe commanding the ice.
Which set up something the league hadn't seen in over a decade. An All-American Stanley Cup final.
The first one since 1950.
Chicago versus Detroit. And this Chicago roster was a powerhouse that had been methodically constructed. On defense, they had an impenetrable wall with Pierre Puller, Al Arbour, Jack Evans, and Elmer Vasco.
And in net.
They had Glenn Hall, who was an unparalleled Ironman. He played all 70 regular season games, logging 4,200 minutes, plus the entire playoff run.
Playing every single minute of a 70-game season is a physical feat that completely defies modern sports science.
It is unimaginable today. No goalie would ever be asked to do that now.
And up front, Chicago was led by these young, explosive offensive dynamos, Bobby Hull and Stan Mikita. The finals went to 6 games. The teams traded blows back and forth. Hull scored twice in Game 1. Detroit fought back to take Game 2.
Mikita scored the game winner in Game 3.
Detroit tied the series again in Game 4. Chicago then took control in Game 5.
You have to remember the context of how fans were consuming this drama. The sports broadcasting landscape was drastically different back then.
There wasn't a game on every channel.
Right. In the U.S., CBS had actually decided not to renew its agreement to air Saturday afternoon games. So the NHL didn't even have a U.S. national television network during this historic All-American final.
That's wild.
In Canada, fans were watching Hockey Night in Canada on CSE, but the games were joined in progress rather than broadcast in their entirety.
So you're missing the start of the game.
Exactly. So millions of fans were following this incredible narrative tension primarily through the radio, reading about it in the morning newspapers, or packing into the freezing arenas themselves.
That brings us to the decisive Game 6 on April 16, 1961, played at Olympia Stadium in Detroit. Imagine the atmosphere in that building. Chicago is on the brink of history.
And they left absolutely no doubt.
They routed the Red Wings 5-1. Reg Fleming opened the scoring shorthanded. Ab McDonald, Eric Nestorenko, Jack Evans, and Kenny Warham all found the back of the net. Glenn Hall shut the door, and the Chicago Blackhawks were Stanley Cup champions.
The historical weight of that victory is monumental. It was Chicago's first Stanley Cup win since 1938.
23 years.
A 23-year drought broken by this incredible roster of tough-as-nails defenders and brilliant young scorers.
Before we wrap up, we should mention that this season also saw the final NHL games of several remarkable players. Fern Flaman of the Bruins, Todd Sloan of the Blackhawks,
And Willie O'Ree.
most notably Willie O'Ree of the Boston Bruins, who made history as the first black player in the NHL. His last game in the league happened during this 1960-61 season.
This raises an important question about legacy. We see the trophies, the records, and the milestones. But at its core, this season was about the relentless march of time.
Yeah.
The old Hart Trophy was physically full. Rocket Richard stepped away. The Canadiens' dynasty crumbled under the weight of a grueling schedule. A new generation, embodied by Keon, Mikita, and Hull, took center ice to define the coming decade.
So, what does this all mean for us looking back? If you take all these incredible nuggets we've pulled from this deep dive, it paints a picture of a league at an absolute boiling point. You have a 70-game gauntlet where players are risking their lives and their livelihoods, playing through catastrophic injuries just to keep their jobs.
Yeah, the balanced story stays with you.
You have Gordie Howe hitting 1,000 points, proving that human limits can always be pushed further. You have Bernie Geoffrion carrying the immense weight of a Montreal legacy and hitting that mythical 50-goal mark on a Thursday night in March.
And finally, a curse broken.
Right. You have a Chicago Blackhawks team that clawed its way out of a 23-year basement to claim the ultimate prize.
I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder.
Go ahead.
When a team like Chicago finally breaks a multi-decade curse, and they do it with a roster full of young, explosive legends like Bobby Hull and Stan Mikita, plus an Ironman goalie like Glenn Hall, you would expect a dynasty to immediately follow.
All the pieces were right there.
They were. Yet history tells us they wouldn't win another championship until the year 2010.
Wow.
49 years. It really makes you wonder what unseen elements, what combinations of luck, locker room chemistry, or front office decisions truly separate a one-time champion from a lasting dynasty in the unpredictable world of sports.
That is a fascinating mystery to chew on. Thank you to everyone listening for jumping into the time machine with us and taking this deep dive into the hockey history books. Keep exploring those Wikipedia rabbit holes and, most importantly, stay insanely curious.